Welcome to This Week in Jacksonville Plus, something for our streaming viewers, in addition to the conversations from our show that airs 9 a.m. Sundays on Channel 4. So this is special content that you will only see here on News for Jax Plus. All right, Florida native Brad Ashwell is the state director for a group called All Voting is Local. I spoke with him about changes he wants to see so more people are actively engaged in voting.
I've been working in these issues for about 20 years, but All Voting is Local has been around for about 5 years, and it was born out of the need to have a group that works year-round on monitoring the elections process at the local and state level to identify any barriers to voters, particularly voters who are historically disenfranchised or historically face different barriers, systemic barriers. So we spent a lot of time working with supervisors of elections at the county level. And during the session, we're up here in the Capitol, just trying to make sure whatever passes out is going to work to voters' benefit as much as possible.
Brad, I reached out because you and your office released a statement after the governor signed Senate Bill 4B into law. So this expands the jurisdiction of the statewide prosecutor over Florida's Office of Election Crimes and Security. How do you feel about that? And let's talk some more of the details.
Well, we really feel like it's moving the state in the opposite direction it needs to be going in. It's giving the statewide prosecutor more power to prosecute voters who they feel have voted illegally at a time where the state is giving them information that leads them to believe they can vote. So, we'd rather see the state move towards making sure voters have the tools and resources and the ability to determine their eligibility before they vote, before they get into trouble, so they don't get into trouble, rather than adding, another proposal that's out there this session is the idea of expanding what's called the Office of Election Crimes and Security, dramatically. And, it's hard to talk about the expansion of the statewide prosecutor without talking about the Office of Election Crimes, which is often referred to as the election police, because a lot of the Office of Election Crimes arrested about 20 people right before the August primary last year. And most of those cases that have been heard in court have been thrown out largely because the statewide prosecutor was trying to prosecute them and they didn't have jurisdiction. So, that's really why this is happening. The Office of Election Crimes is arresting people. It's going to court. Judges are saying the statewide prosecutor doesn't have jurisdiction. And now the state and the legislature are trying to work around that.
This Office of Election Crimes, this goes to the Secretary of State's office, if I understand that correctly, right?
That's right.
So
right.
Just really in the last year that has started, or last year and a half, or what have you, the idea that people who shouldn't vote, there's enforcement that they shouldn't vote, you're not opposed to that. You're saying they need to know in advance so they don't commit some kind of criminal act because they're just trying to exercise what they believe is their right to vote. Is that accurate?
That's right. What we're seeing are people are just confused. So Amendment 4 passed, giving returning citizens the right to vote. It had some exceptions, though, for voters who had committed violent crimes like sex crimes and murder. And then there also, in the implementation of that, in 2019, the legislature passed SB 7066, which required fines and fees that are accrued by the returning citizens to be paid before they could exercise their right to vote. So there's just a lot of confusion. Not even at every level, voters, supervisors of elections, even state officials, they aren't able to tell definitively whether a voter can vote. And if you can't rely on the state, who can you rely on to make that determination? So, voting shouldn't be a crime. If someone is voting illegally, obviously that should be stopped and addressed. I don't think anybody's against that. But we feel like the way they're proceeding is putting the cart before the horse, basically jumping to prosecutions and arrests and prosecutions rather than, putting investment in the front end to keep these people out of trouble. It's a broken system, and they're just not addressing the fundamental problem here.
Your statement right after the governor signed that bill that we're talking about said this is a clear power grab meant to take these cases away from impartial state attorneys. What do you mean exactly by that?
Well, what we're seeing is in counties where the state is perceiving the state attorneys to not work to their favor, they're inserting the statewide prosecutor. And, that's where the statewide prosecutor is running into trouble and the cases are being dismissed by the judges. And that's why the legislature is now trying to expand their purview, their jurisdiction, to make sure that they don't run into that obstacle. So they're basically, yeah, it's a power grab.
Is there a way that you can see an organization like yours, other voters' rights groups, can work with what's happening in the Secretary of State's office or what the legislature seems to be pushing forward that you object to?
Yeah, we have to. There's no other option than to work with the environment you're given. But I think, there are people looking at whether this was a constitutional expansion of the statewide prosecutors' powers. I think our group isn't a litigation group. Our group mainly sticks to the policy realm and advocacy at the local level, and then communicating to voters changes that are made and that sort of thing. So we won't litigate, but I know other groups are looking at that.
You can watch for more in-depth interviews just like this one. That's in addition to our show that airs 9 a.m. Sundays. You'll find it on Channel 4. And this is special content that you'll only see here on News4JAX Plus.